afternoon and welcome to today's World Affairs Council presentation with John Gallen, entitled A Journey of Heart and Soul Across Spain. Today's presentation by John will focus on his walk along the Camino de Santiago pilgrimage route from France across northern Spain to the Atlantic Ocean. This presentation is somewhat different than our usual presentations. It's more cultural in nature. And this is in response to comments from our members that they are willing to entertain these types of presentations. We've had a couple and they've been very well received. By way of background, John is the owner of EthosSource, a Reading-based office furniture manufacturer and dealer, and the owner and president of Wyatt Seating, an office seating manufacturer. John has served on the boards of the Y of Reading and Berks County, Greater Reading Economic Partnership, the Karen Foundation, and United Way of Berks County, and serves his community as a Wyomissing Borough Council person and Finance Committee Chair. He also currently serves on Alvernia's President's Advisory Council. John has been recognized by the Greater Reading Chamber Alliance as a two-time Entrepreneur of the Year and has earned several awards for his community service by Safe Berks, Easy Does It, the Karen Foundation, and the Y. He graduated from Georgetown with a Bachelor of Science degree in Languages and Linguistics. So without further ado, I will turn the presentation over to John. Welcome.
Thank you, David. I hope everyone can hear me fine. I think we have all the technology worked out. I'd like to just share a story. I'm a storyteller in words and pictures. I will be talking about the Camino de Santiago, or the Way of St. James. I'd like to discuss a little bit of, as David said, about the history and culture, and also a little on the logistics, but most importantly, the unity of humanity that can be found in walking towards a common goal and a common cause of pilgrimage across northern Spain. I've written and spoken about these experiences several times. I have a time allotment that's a little shorter than I normally have, but I will try to rush through what I can and still cover what I feel are the most important aspects of walking the Camino de Santiago. Hopefully, at the end of my talk, some people will be inspired to go take a walk themselves, and I'll be more than happy to talk with you about doing that. I have already encouraged and been involved with a few other people that have taken a walk. So I'd like to start by sharing that there are many caminos. This first slide shows various routes that are in northern, this is all central and northern Spain. There's that many routes just in Spain coming across the country, all converging. Let's see, can you see my cursor? I hope you can. The Santiago is in the northwest corner, also known as Galicia, part of Spain, north of Portugal. Most of my talk will be discussing the red route, the Camino Frances, or the French way. It begins in France, comes all the way across northern Spain through some major cities, arrives in Santiago, and then many pilgrims continue on to the ocean, to the end of the earth, the town of Finisterre and Murcia. I walked the Camino Frances in 2018, but I also will be blending in photos and stories from my second Camino, which was this past summer, where I walked the Camino San Salvador, this blue route, north from León to Oviedo, and then from Oviedo on the primitive way, which was the first Camino. First walked in the year 811 by King Alfonso II to pay homage to the apostle. So a little bit about St. James. He is the apostle, the brother of John. St. James the Great, he's often referred to as. It is believed that he, after the death of Christ, went to the Iberian Peninsula to evangelize, and after several years returned to Jerusalem, where he unfortunately became the first martyred apostle, was beheaded. His followers placed his body into a stone boat, which made its way through the Mediterranean and up to the northwestern coast of Spain, where it was found covered in scallop shells. And I'll go into the scallop and the symbolism involved with the scallop shell as we talk. But the boat arrived covered in scallops. The body was recovered and buried. This is the legend or the story of St. James, that 800 years later, a peasant under a field of stars found the remains and believed them to be the remains of St. James. Went to the local bishop, who then went and talked to the Pope in Rome, and they confirmed, yes, these are the remains of St. James. Build a cathedral, build a church. And this is how the pilgrimage route became established, is that the church was built in Santiago de Compostela, which means the field of stars, where the body was found. And this is one of the major cities of northwestern Spain to this day. And people have been making this pilgrimage for 1,200 years. So my story with the Caminos a long time ago. I'm on an overnight train from Madrid to Santiago with my sister in July 24th, 1982. And our older woman on the train is looking at us and pointing to our backpacks, asking, "Son peregrinos?" I didn't know why she was asking. I knew what she was asking. She was asking if we were pilgrims. And I shared that with my sister, and I said, I understand Spanish. I'm fluent in Spanish. I know what she's asking, but I don't know why she wants to know if we're pilgrims. We found out the next morning by sheer chance. We arrived on Sunday, July 25th, 1992. July 25th is the day of St. James, the day of Santiago. When the holy day or the feast day falls on a Sunday, the Pope in 1120, Pope Calixtus II declared that it would become a holy year. The entire year would be a celebration. And so we had randomly arrived in Santiago on the holiest day of the year, and it was a Sunday in 1982. And we learned about pilgrimage. We found out why she was asking us that question. And we spent our day watching people celebrating parades. We entered the cathedral, and then we continued on our way traveling through northern Spain. And I didn't really think much about the Camino for decades. And in the year approximately 2012, I believe a movie came out that's called The Way, which is the English for the Camino, El Camino. And it stars Martin Sheen. It's directed by his son, Emilio Estevez. It's a very touching movie, and I would recommend that you all take a look if you're interested in what I have to share today, because it's a beautiful story of a pilgrim on the Camino. So the one thing I wanted to share also is the coincidence of arriving on a Sunday. A date falling on a day of the week happens in a strange pattern of 6 years, 5 years, 6 years, and 11 years. And in fact, since 1982, there have only been 5 Sunday, July 25th. And last year was one of them. So how do you walk across a country? Well, before I get to that, the next slide I wanted to share is the first slide where the Caminos in Spain. These are Caminos or pilgrimage routes all over Europe. And they lead to Rome. They lead to Santiago. These are the two most popular or famous religious pilgrimages of the Catholic faith and of Christianity. So these routes start traditionally from wherever you were. You left your house and you walked to the pilgrimage site, and then you returned. So how do you walk across the country? The comedian Stephen Wright has a funny saying that everywhere is within walking distance if you have the time. And time is what the pilgrimage and Camino is all about. It takes time, approximately 5 weeks. And so my pilgrimage began by following the yellow arrows, which were painted starting in around 1982, that same year that I first was in Santiago. A priest in the town of Osabrero, northwestern Spain, petitioned the government to mark the Camino. It had fallen out of use, and the infrastructure was not established And he said, I think people would come and walk again and bring tourism back to Spain if we marked the route. And the government said, we don't have any money, but we can give you some yellow paint. And so he began to paint yellow arrows across the country. So the pilgrimage of the French Way begins in France, in the town of Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. It's at the foot of the pass, Pied-de-Port, over the Pyrenees. It's a very difficult climb to go up and over and walk into Spain. This is my backpack, my first day on the Camino. It weighed 30 pounds. There's a scallop shell on my pack that is the symbol of the pilgrim. As I said, the boat that had St. James remains in it was covered in scallops. That has become the symbol of St. James in all of the iconography of the saint. When you see the doors of Notre Dame or any other church, you will typically see St. James with shells and a walking staff like a pilgrim. So I began my climb up into the Pyrenees, the beautiful mountains, very similar in size to the New England mountains of Vermont and New Hampshire. And arrived for my first evening at an albergue, which is what they call the hostels or the boarding houses that pilgrims stay in. And I learned very quickly, because I was late in the day, that when you're the last pilgrim to arrive, you receive the top bunk closest to the bathroom. And later that evening, we sat down for dinner, and before dessert, the innkeeper said, before we begin the dessert, before I serve the dessert, I need every person here, every pilgrim, to tell us three things. What is your name? Where are you from? And why are you walking the Camino? And I was having dinner with about 40 people, and at least 12 countries were represented, and 40 reasons for walking the Camino. And it was the beginning of getting to understand the draw, the attraction of the Camino for people from around the world who were following in the footsteps of pilgrims that have been walking this way for 1,200 years. The next morning we woke up. I would like to share throughout my talk here some of the Beatitudes of the pilgrim. The first one is, blessed are you, pilgrim, when you contemplate the Camino and you discover it's full of names and dawns. Day after day, you wake up, you meet people, you see the sun, and you walk. While you're walking with these people that you just spent the evening with, all kind of leave after breakfast, and it's a lot of people. You can see there were at least 40 or 50 people in that albergue that night. And I soon realized that some of them I may never see again, and some of them I know to this day. The crowd started to thin out as we got higher and higher into the mountains. This is a mountain trail on another Camino that I did, but similar to what it was like climbing on the Camino. There are religious shrines. There are churches everywhere on the Camino. Yeah, the slide's a little slow. I like to say this is not a religious talk, but this is a religious walk. The Camino is there because of religion, and it is the purpose for many people in the pilgrimage. So one of the things that you learn as you're walking is there are various markers and monuments, and this big stone says Saint Jacques de Compostelle. There's a huge scallop shell there, and you can get an idea of where the food coquille Saint Jacques comes from. Scallops on the half shell, they're named for St. James, Saint Jacques. This sign also says 765 kilometers to Santiago, which is just under 500 miles. I had a long way to go. This was only my second morning. Climbing higher and higher into the Pyrenees. There was even some snow still in late April, up at the pass. And then I walked into Spain. And nothing but this simple stone, which says Navarra, which is the region I was walking into, and the icon of the scallop shell, which I'll talk about a little bit more, and you'll see throughout the presentation. Ultreya et Susea is a common greeting amongst pilgrims. Ultreya can be translated as upward or onward, and et Susea can be translated as and upward. And so one pilgrim would say to another Ultreya, and the other would respond et Susea. And it's kind of like on beyond, and I'll see you in Santiago. This is the common marker for the Camino. I have a tiny little one on my desk in my office as a paperweight, but it shows the stylized scallop pointing the way to Santiago. These mark the entire route and have mileage or kilometers on each one of them. Here are some images of St. James with the scallop and the walking staff. And you'll know whenever you see an image of St. James again, because he'll have the scallop and a staff. Very often there's a gourd hanging from the staff, which is his water bottle. So a little bit about this design of the scallop pointing the way to Santiago is that each of the lines on the shell represent the various routes that I showed you in the first slide, all the different caminos that all lead towards Santiago. And then you begin to walk and walk and walk. You get into a routine. Wake up, eat, walk, sleep, repeat. And as I said before, it takes about 5 weeks, at least 30 days to walk to Santiago and then onward to the sea. And so you get into that rhythm, and they say the Camino can be split into 3 phases, the physical, the mental, and the spiritual. And the first part is obviously the physical, because you're carrying a pack and walking 15 to 20 miles in a day. And I'm an avid outdoor hiker and walker, and typically know that I can walk 3 miles in an hour. Most people walk about 3 miles an hour. And so when I was reading the guidebook, thinking about 15 to 18 miles in a day, I figured, oh, I'll be walking for 5 or 6 hours. What am I going to do with the rest of my time? Only to realize that when you're walking 15 miles, you don't walk 3 miles an hour. You have to slow down and pace yourself, especially because you're doing it day after day after day. And so you begin this walk, and there's another beatitude that I will share, which is, blessed are you, pilgrim, if your knapsack is emptying of things and your heart does not know where to hang up so many feelings and emotions. And in fact, by my 3rd day of the Camino, I arrived in the beautiful city of Pamplona, where they have the running of the bulls. And I sent home 10 pounds of things from my backpack to lighten the load. They say that we carry our fears in our backpack, and that there's a lot of things that we can do without. And so I began to lighten up as I was experiencing this physical aspect of the Camino and realizing that it was time to simplify, and I didn't need to carry so many things. Soon after the first week, the 8th, 9th, 10th day, you go to the city of Burgos, which is a large city, and then you hit just a few more photos here of these beautiful flowers in the spring, and you can see the number of people on the walk. This was just a wonderful photo that was taken by a fellow pilgrim who asked me to give her my phone because the picture just looked too pretty, and I'm so glad she did, because I love this photo. A little bit more on the physical part before I get to the mental. So this part of Spain is very hilly, and you get to judge distances on these 15-mile and 18-mile days. I get a really good feel for how far something was and how long it would take me to get there. As you would see town after town by the church steeples, a lot of the towns are on hills. Beautiful landscapes and countryside. A lot of my time was spent walking alone. Other time was spent walking with many people. But this is just to give you a feel for the beautiful scenery. And then you approach the mental, and the mental, as I said, it happens about day 10. You arrive in the plains of Spain. La Meseta, it's called. It's a vast plain, and it goes for about 10 days. You're walking in the flats. And even in late April, early May, it was extremely hot and sunny on this part of the Camino. And you really kind of get to be alone with your thoughts, depending on the time of day and the number of people that might be out there. So there's another beatitude I'll share. Blessed are you, pilgrim, if you discover that the Camino opens your eyes to what is not seen. And during this part, you're just this vast landscapes, hot sun, doing this ritualized walking, wake up, eat, walk, repeat, day after day in the heat. And your mind gets to wander and really think about life and the world. And ultimately, you walk out of the Meseta and you begin on the spiritual part of the Camino. I believe that there's a quote I want to share. A modern day Stoic author named Ryan Holiday captures a feeling that I had on the Meseta and for the rest of my Camino, which is, yes, we are in motion when we walk, but it is not frenzied or even conscious motion. It is repetitive, ritualized. It is a deliberate motion. It's an exercise in peace. It's a walking meditation. And that is, for me, what pilgrimage is. You set out on a long, long journey with whatever goal or aim or whatever your why is. And you have the time to explore that and explore the beauty of Spain and sunrises and great food. Café con leche, espressos, Spanish tortilla, which is an omelet of egg and potato, wonderful bread. I did not carry my own food with me. I just enjoyed all the local cafes that I walked to every day and that I arrived to in the evenings. So as you begin to enter the spiritual part or the last third of the Camino, you now have friends. You're walking with other people, getting to know them, their stories, their why. You're on a similar pace with some of them, so you're seeing them every day. And just a joyous celebration of following the yellow arrows day after day with other people from around the world. And you walk, and you walk, and you walk. This is a picture from this past summer. You might see two different colored backpacks. That's because these photos are from two different trips. And you climb into higher mountains. The Cantabrian Mountains are actually higher than the Pyrenees at this part of the Camino. And after the city of Leon, you walk through Astorga and a couple other towns, and then you climb a mountain. And you get to the highest point of the Camino Frances, where there is a tall wooden pole with an iron cross on the top of it, and it's called the Crucifero. And it's customary for the pilgrim to carry something from home that they would like to leave at that cross. And it could be a photo, a poem, a note. And you climb up the pile of all the other offerings and lay your stone at the cross. There's a poem, a prayer I will read now about the Crucifero. Lord, may this stone, a symbol of my efforts on the pilgrimage, that I lay at the foot of the cross of the Savior, one day weigh the balance in favor of my good deeds, when the deeds of my life are judged. So again, this is the entry into the spiritual and even the magical part of the Camino. You're up high in the mountains again. You're going to be in the mountains for a while, going up and down. This image actually has some bikers in it. People do bicycle the Camino. You can bike the entire French way in about 2 weeks. It follows the same course, but is largely on roads instead of on walking paths. And then I'd like to share one of the most special parts of my entire Camino journey, which was my 26th day of walking the French way back in 2018. I awoke one morning and I had an option. My guidebook said there's the regular way, which goes through the valley along a highway before climbing a very steep mountain to the village of Osabrero, which is a magical place. And I knew that. And for many people, this is a difficult day. The climb to Osabrero is very hard. But my guidebook told me the traditional way was actually called the hard way, the Camino Duro. And naturally, I chose that route, which meant that I had to climb another mountain. First thing in the morning, I had to climb a mountain. So in the morning mist and rain, and I got to climb to a little village known as Predella, and there was no other pilgrims on this Camino. And I knew I had chosen the right way. I got to see this beautiful rainbow in the chestnut trees. The entire village's economy is based on harvesting chestnuts in the fall. A very simple way of life. I was climbing on mountain paths very similar to mountains I traveled to around the world, with heather in bloom and broom. The white is Spanish broom. And just climbing into this beautiful landscape with hardly anyone around. And then descending back to the valley to meet up with the other Camino as the sun came out and this beautiful day began. And I already had one mountain under my shoes. So as I continued on, I will share that this is kind of the magical part of my Camino for me. I began to experience I'm going to read this because I wrote this a while ago, but I began to experience a tingling of my spine right up my neck, into my head, over the sheer joy and beauty of my daily walking ritual towards Santiago. Along the way this day, I had a sense of floating and not climbing at all. I was in a flow state. I was in the zone. All sense of time and distance melted away. And as the afternoon progressed, I just kept climbing and climbing and was not tired at all. And I arrived to Osabrero, which is a Celtic village with thatched, round stone buildings with thatched roofs, looking a lot like the Celts in Ireland. And I arrived to the sound of the church bells ringing at Santa Maria la Real, which is the oldest church on the entire French way of the Camino. And so it was 7 p.m. I had been walking for 11 hours, over 20 miles on the hard way. And this is a photo of that I took, a selfie, while I was in the flow state, just kind of expressing the joy that I was feeling that afternoon before I arrived to Osabrero. And here's the church. And so that's what it looked like when I walked up to the doors, and I opened the doors and I went inside, and there were all of my fellow pilgrims. I knew these people. These were my pilgrims. I recognized their coats, their jackets. I stood I sat with my friends from the Camino, and it was a very, very emotional experience, this Mass. It was said in 8 languages. As my bio said, I'm a language major and love linguistics. So hearing 3 different readings done by the pilgrims in their native tongues was really moving and very emotional for everyone in the church. And afterwards, I had a chance to meet the priest. And after every Mass on the Camino, there's a pilgrim's blessing that is given. And it's a special blessing just for the pilgrims that are walking, that they may have safe travel to Santiago. So I met the priest. His name is Francisco Castro Miramontes. And Castro is like a building or a tower or fort on the top of a mountain. And his last name is Miramontes, the mountain view. So this priest of Osabrero, I was to learn later, is a very special man who has played a part in my Camino experience and all the way through to my second Camino. It was in Osabrero that I met up with some of my friends I'd been walking with for days, and we all decided when we would arrive in Santiago. And These are two Koreans and a woman from Argentina who I'm still in touch with to this day, all three of them. And we all decided we're going to arrive on Sunday, May 21st, which was May 20th, which was Pentecost that year. So we could see a high mass celebrated in the cathedral. And then I began to walk and picked up my pace so that I could arrive on time. About 10 miles from Crucifero, I was having coffee in a little cafe, and I noticed the priest from the night before walking down the street in plain clothes, wearing jeans and a t-shirt. And I ran out from the cafe and I stopped in and I said, Father, that I'm speaking all in Spanish, but said, Father, that mass last night was, you know, one of the most emotional experiences of my life, a very special experience of the Camino. I'll never forget it. And he embraced me in the middle of the road and told me, El Camino de la Vida sigue después de Santiago. And that means the way, or the Camino of life, continues after Santiago. And very wise and words that have stayed with me ever since and really became meaningful as I completed that Camino and moved on with my life and my desires to do further Caminos. So the comment about my friends and deciding where we were going to go reminds me of one more Beatitude, which is, blessed are you, pilgrim, if what concerns you most is not to arrive, as to arrive with others. And so we did. We walked to Santiago. I entered with other people. This is the sign at the city limits. These are the last steps to the cathedral. This is from this past July. That is the cathedral. Now there are throngs of people around, but I managed to get that photo with only one person in it. And it's just a time for real celebration. We've completed a walk of 500 miles. It was 31 days for me to do the 500 miles to get to Santiago. That's about 16 or 17 miles a day. And you celebrate with your friends. These are friends that I've met on both of my Caminos. These are the shots we took when we arrived. All of these people in these few photos I am still in contact with and spent very special, meaningful time with on the Camino. I didn't talk about this before, but most of my walking was done in sandals. I found it to be more comfortable. I had very dirty feet, but it was a very comfortable way of taking the pilgrimage. This is the interior of the cathedral with the large botafumero hanging from the ceiling. It is a huge incense burner that is swung through the church. It was said that they needed that much incense to cover the smell of the pilgrims who had been walking for weeks to arrive. Behind the altar is a gilded, bejeweled Santiago. And during the Mass, I noticed that there was movement up behind him above the altar, and found out later that you're allowed to embrace the apostle. That's a close-up of the botafumero. They shovel the incense into that thing, and it takes 6 men to swing it across the main transept of the cathedral. This is me embracing the apostle on arrival, paying homage to St. James and the end of my pilgrimage. And his tomb is beneath the altar, directly beneath the altar. The photo on the left is the tomb. The photo on the right is the cross of St. James. On arrival of a pilgrimage, you receive a certificate that says you've completed that particular pilgrimage. This is one that I received on a shorter pilgrimage this past summer in the city of Oviedo. This is my passport from this past summer. So along the way, as you walk from town to town, you have a credential. This is my credential or passport, and you get a rubber stamp or a hand-drawn seal at every albergue or church that you visit. You can get them at bars as well, but they tend to frown upon all the stamps being from bars. So you should get a few from churches, and albergue is on the way. When you arrive at the Pilgrim's office to receive your Compostela, believe it or not, they ask you 3 questions. And it's the same 3 questions that the innkeeper asked in France on my first night. What is your name? Where are you from? Where did you start? They ask. And why are you walking the Camino? And they really ask for 3, they give you 3 options: for physical reasons, for cultural reasons, or for religious reasons. And if you answer religious, they write your Compostela, one of your certificates, your diploma, in Latin. And so they fill out all these forms and give you your final stamp of your Camino pilgrimage. And here's one of my Compostelas. And what I would like to point out to everyone here, I know we're running on time, so I'm trying to rush through this, but I'd like to point out the date right here. If you follow my cursor, the 25th of July, 2021. So this past summer, because of COVID and the fact that I knew the Camino would not be that crowded, I decided to see if I could arrive in Santiago on Sunday, July 25th, once again, 39 years after I did it in 1982. And in fact, this is my Compostela. I arrived on the 24th, but I had my Compostela filled out on July 25th. And very, very special to kind of complete that circle of 39 years and arrive on the Jubilee to huge celebration. So I arrived on the 24th, the eve, and there were thousands of people converging on the city, even during COVID, everyone masked, to celebrate the Jubilee. They even had fireworks at midnight. So it's just a wonderful, wonderful way of rounding out my second Camino, was to arrive on the 24th on the Jubilee. And then it's on to the sea. So you just continue to follow the yellow arrows on the stone monuments and walk 3 more days to reach the end of the earth, or the ocean, and the town of Finisterre. Blessed are you, pilgrim, when you don't have words to give thanks for everything that surprises you at every twist and turn of the way. This part is just really the culmination of having walked for 4 weeks, having a few more days to kind of unwind the journey mentally and with your friends, and just kind of to wrap up the experience. There's a few photos. On my last Camino, I took a lot of pictures of my little backpack leaning up against the church. I didn't get too much into logistics, but my pack only weighed 15 pounds on my second Camino. I carried very little. There are stone crosses that are hundreds of years old marking the way. Hundreds of churches all over. And then the trail, the way, comes to an end and you reach the ocean. And the Atlantic Ocean. It's actually, this photo is from Muxía from this past July. It's a combination of pictures here of both Finisterre and Muxía. I've been to both. It's just an incredible experience to know that you've just walked almost 600 miles and crossed the entire Iberian Peninsula to reach the ocean. And put your feet in the sea, and really just a time of joy and celebration. My last spot for my little pack, almost completely empty. Giving thanks and just enjoying the arrival at the 0 kilometer marker in Galicia. And the final steps to the church in Muxía, which I was able to attend a service there as well, and just enjoy the sunset. What I'd like to wrap up and get to the question and answer, but I'd like to finish with this. The Camino is people. It's really that unity of humanity that I started with. People from all over the world that have a shared goal. We meet on the Camino while walking, doing the most simple thing we can do, which is simply walk along, help each other on the way. And for whatever reasons, whatever our why happens to be, we can do that together and arrive to these beautiful places with those wonderful memories and experiences. So I'll share a few last photos to express that feeling. And I think you'll see in the eyes of the people that I'm about to show you that shared humanity, the oneness of all people. This photo I just had to throw in here. This is a picture I took before I left. My wife took before I left with everything in my pack. And then what I had left when I came home of my first Camino. And the thing that I like to share about this is I stepped on the scale before I left, and I stepped on the scale when I got home with the pack on. And I was 30 pounds lighter when I arrived home. 15 from the backpack and 15 from me. So that's an added benefit of the Camino, is it's physically rewarding. Again, I'll finish up with just a few photos of friends and people I became very close with, most of whom I'm still in touch with. We follow each other on Facebook and we text and communicate regularly. But just look at the eyes and you'll get a feel for the magic. They say the physical, the mental, the spiritual. This is the magic part. The faces of the people. I'll share where some of the people are from. This woman's from Brazil, woman from Poland and Greenland, Mexico, Argentina, Brazil, Germany, Italians. I just wished Lisa in the middle of the photo a happy birthday yesterday. This young man is a Spaniard who returned my pole, my walking stick to me. I had left it at his cafe. This is an 18-year-old German woman who walked the Camino by herself after graduating high school. I was very impressed with her. These are my dearest friends from this past summer's Camino, Melissa and Pablo. And I do want to share one thing about that Pablo said. One night we were having dinner, all of our group together, our Camino family, and he said, you know, the world would be a better place if after the elections, every politician that had just gotten elected had to walk a Camino before they could take office. And I really thought that was a wonderful expression because of the way the Camino brings people together and makes us feel. This is a Portuguese man I met on my last day of the Camino this summer. Two young women from Holland, two Americans from New York. And I'll close with this photo. Look at the eyes of this man. I met him walking the other direction. I was about 5 miles from the ocean, and he was walking back to Santiago. And he told me he had started in Paris. So he was on day 80 or 81 at this point. And I asked him, because I figured he would know, if there was a mass that evening in Muxia when I arrived. And he said, yes, there's a mass at 7 p.m. at the church on the water, on the rocks. Great. I told him I like to attend the masses in the evenings, especially in the small towns, especially on my last evening. And he said, yes, me too. I attended masses all across the Camino for 80 days. And then he said something that really hit me. Without any prompting whatsoever, he said to me, the most important mass of my entire Camino over these past 80 days was in a small church in the village of Crucifero. And then he said the priest there had something really special about him, a spirituality. And so I love to end my Camino. This is 3 years from when I met that priest. This young man shared with me that one of the highlights of his entire Camino was also the same man in the same little village in northwestern Spain. So with that, I end with Buen Camino and can open it for questions.
Wonderful, John. John, we're going to take just a brief pause. And I think, can you see the questions? And I can review them with you too. But we'll pause for a moment, John, to share with folks some upcoming events that we have and or upcoming speakers, I mean to say. This March coming up is International Women's Month. And in connection with that, I feel we have a very fine presentation, we believe, from Stephanie Foster, who will be talking about taking action, fighting for women and girls. Her background, her history of all this kind of involvement will be very, very interesting to us. So keep that in mind for March 16. Coming up in April 13, Laura Lopez Calonga, who is a visiting instructor of Spanish at Albright College, will be speaking to us about the immigration crisis in Europe and the case of Spain. I suppose that maybe even John, in your walking, you may have encountered some of that, I don't know. Folks, we have a young man who, through the auspices of the World Affairs Council of America, who's spoken about this, written about this, who took a trip to Qatar. And he's graduating in just a few weeks in May from Penn State University with a degree in political science and a minor in history. And James Garrett will be talking to us about Qatar and its emerging role in the Middle East. We're looking forward to that. And I might just say to folks, keep your eyes peeled for further information. We have planned, and this is going to happen, May 5 at the Doubletree in Reading. We're having a luncheon program. It's a panel discussion with Representatives Houlihan and Representative Musser. They both represent together most of Berks County and beyond then, respectively. And we think it's going to be a very fine discussion on foreign affairs. Representative Musser is a conservative Republican, as I understand things, and actually is, I live in his district. And Representative Houlihan is a more liberal Democrat. I've had a great interaction with their staff and with Congressman Musser directly. We think it's going to be a fine program. Keep your eyes peeled for more information about that and for the registration. It's May 5. Well, John, we monitor people's interest and attendance throughout. I guarantee you, as I've looked at things, we haven't had one person dropping off to the whole presentation. We've had close to 70 people with us here today. And we do have a couple of questions that have come in our chat, and let's see if I can pull them up. John, can you see that? Or if you can't, I'll share them.
Yes, I can see the chat.
All right.
So the question is from Bruce May.
Yes. And incidentally, if you'll, I can do that or you can. I don't know that the rest of our people participating can see it. So if you'll take the question, summarize it, and then give your response.
Okay. It says, from your experience, do you think most walkers are Christian in one form or another? I would say yes. I think they are. There are something I didn't really share, but I spoke about that movie, The Way. That movie in 2012, I believe it came out, really repopularized the Camino in the United States. So whether the people that took notice and enjoyed the story and the desire to go walk the Camino did it for religious reasons or were Christians is not really the point I think a lot of people are not walking it for religious reasons. I think there's a general, there's a spirituality perhaps, or just the desire to immerse yourself in the culture and the experience of meeting so many other people. But so that movie, The Way, made it very popular in the US. There was Shirley MacLaine wrote a book about it years before. That also popularized it in the US. Paulo Coelho wrote a book called The Pilgrimage. That popularized it in South America and all the Portuguese and Spanish-speaking countries. Someone wrote a book in South Korea. Well, it's very Christian and Catholic in South Korea. And so there are a lot of South Koreans on the Camino. And the same in Germany. A famous German comedian wrote a book. His book was called Well, I'm Off Then. And it was a humorous account of walking the Camino. That popularized the Camino in Germany. So this resurgence of popularity it's overwhelming, actually. It was estimated that 300,000 people walked the Camino the year before COVID. So I do not think that, I mean, yes, I would say most of them are probably of Christian heritage, but that is, I walked one whole day on the Meseta with a woman who was Jewish from Jerusalem, Israeli. So.
Second question there from Russell Peckman, if you want to summarize that.
Yes,
well,
Russell,
go ahead.
a lifelong dear friend of mine from college. And I'm glad that he wrote what he wrote, because he knew, he follows me on Facebook and he knew that I took the trip. But I think sharing the way that I have written about this and like to talk about it really kind of gets across the feeling. I still am passionate about going on mountain climbing trips, but I also can't wait to go on my next Camino. I will walk again and find another route, which is actually the third question. Are you interested, from Anne Sheehan, are you interested in walking the Camino through France? Yes, there's a route from the town of Le Puy, which starts about, I think it adds about 2 weeks till you get to the border with Spain. There's one from Lourdes. There are Caminos from Portugal, from Lisbon, straight up to Santiago. So there are Caminos all around. One route that I'm very passionate about and thinking of doing is the Via Francigena, which goes from Canterbury in London across the Channel all the way through France and Switzerland to Rome. And that is much longer undertaking, of approximately 75 days.
John, I think the next question from John Muir really summarizes for some of the folks here. What about older folks? What about families and the experience? And maybe you could you're a physically robust man, but are all walkers in that same way? Or can you discuss that a little bit, the challenges for some folks, maybe?
Yes, I was in an in-between demographic. There were a lot of younger people walking the Camino. They were most of the ones I met, I was there in the spring, so they weren't out of school. So these were people that had finished school. Most of them I found had been working for a few years, doing whatever they were doing. They were in their mid to late 20s and decided to go take a walk and do a pilgrimage for whatever they were seeking. And then there was a huge demographic of retired people from all over the world. So I was younger than that demographic and far older than the other demographic. You have to remember, it does take a lot of time. And so it's a matter of who can take that time. You can break the Camino down. I didn't really discuss that, but many Europeans walk the Camino a week at a time, or 2 weeks at a time. And they'll do it in segments over the course of several years until they walk the route that they want to walk. But there were a lot of retired people, and from the standpoint of physical, anybody that can walk can do the Camino. You just do it at your own pace. There's no requirement of how fast you have to do it. I met a woman who was 80 years old, and she even flew home in between for the baptism of a grandchild. And she told me she was going to take 8 weeks and walking about 10 miles in a day. A lot of people work rest days into their itinerary so that they can stop and visit the cities that they walk through and spend some time there. So
I assume that, I do want to get to a question about the spirituality, but since we asked these practical questions, you had some lodging arranged along the way, or you just pick up the lodging as you arrive?
I had 1 night reservation that very first night in France. And then after that, I would make my arrangements each day as I was walking, because I really didn't know if I had the opportunity to build rest days. I had built rest days into my itinerary. I just didn't use them. But not knowing how far I would be walking each day, I would typically look at about noon and figure out, okay, I'll go to that town. And then I would start to call ahead and find a place to stay. And that became very difficult this past summer, because as I got closer to Santiago, the closer you get, the more people there are, because an official Camino is 100 kilometers. For the pilgrim's office, where you when you arrive to get your certificate, you have to have walked at least 100 kilometers or 60 miles, which is about 3 or 4 days. And so 3 or 4 days out from Santiago, all the towns that are that far away from any direction get really, really busy as you get closer, because a lot of people start there and they're only out for a 3 or 4 day walk or a week-long walk. And so this past July, it got very difficult to find rooms. And I was actually denied a room that I had already reserved one night, and I ended up having to walk 25 miles that day. It was my second to last day, and I just had to keep on going to get to a place where I could sleep. But,
well, John, you're by everyone's thinking about, when we think about you, you're a very successful person, a very successful businessman, but you're doing this for your own development, your own growth, your own sense of spirit. Could you summarize what these experiences have done for you as a person and how you take that into your daily life?
yes, that was something, especially from the first Camino. My takeaway from the first Camino was that whole experience of being with people from all over the world and recognizing that we're really not too different, especially when we're helping each other with a common cause, something as simple as just helping to carry their pack or carry something from their pack, or helping them with their treatment of their blisters, or getting food, or finding a place to stay, sharing rooms. I shared rooms with many people along the way, both Caminos. And so from that, my takeaway was kindness, just being kind to people, finding joy in little things and simplifying, realizing that when I left my house, everything that was in my bag, there's no suitcase and a carry-on. It was one bag, and that was going to be what I was carrying for 5 weeks. This past summer, it was for 4 weeks. And anything extra was just something you'd have to carry, so you leave it out. And so my takeaway was the simplicity of how little we need to be alive and to feel the experiences of life, and to enjoy them with other people. And that's the part that I think my friend Russ pointed out there, but I love to share about it, is go do it. You don't have to walk for 5 weeks. You can walk for a week, and you can get that experience. After a few days, you get into that rhythm. And so I would say that the Camino has just helped me going about my daily life. It's added a component to my days before the second Camino and since the second Camino that is just, it has nothing to do with business or anything else. It's improved all of my relationships with family and friends.
Judy Stout, I should have asked you this before you got to this kind of wrap-up thing, which is wonderful. Are you still able to walk or travel by horse or donkey and still get your certificate?
Yeah, there's a beautiful, there are a lot of blogs on Facebook. So anyone that's interested in the Camino, just go onto Facebook and type in Camino in the groups, and you'll find 100 groups. One is called American Pilgrims on the Camino, and I'm an active participant in that one. And people go there to ask questions about, get advice and ask questions. But there's a beautiful blog of a woman and an older man doing the Camino with a donkey and a cart. And the photos are incredible. The woman is an artist, and I don't know what the requirements are. That sounds about right, though, that you have to complete about 150 miles for credit. But yes, I saw people on horseback doing the Camino, and this person that I'm sure you can find online if you look up, the woman with the donkey on the Camino. You'll probably find images and stories about her.
Well, John, we want to thank you very much. For me personally, when seeing you having walked in sandals, and you've referenced some biblical references along the way, I'm thinking of you walking in your sandals, and if you had to leave a village, just shaking the dust off those sandals and moving on. So any final words for us?
I'll start with or finish with what I started with. If anyone is interested, if I've inspired anyone to want to walk I'd be happy to talk with people. There's one person that I spoke with after my first Camino who went and walked a Camino for 2 weeks or so from the city of Leon. She was written about in the Reading paper, and you know, it's wonderful to be able to share it with someone who actually goes and does it. And I was able to follow along with her, and it's a great experience. And so I'm happy to share it with anyone. If anyone's interested, please reach out to me.
Thank you again, John. John, we have a small ceramic representing our shared Pennsylvania Dutch culture. We're going to give to you as a gift, and I'll get that to you. We want to thank you very, very much. Attendance, people here, we had fine attendance today. Lots of people staying with us the whole way. Just wonderful. And you know, you shared with us, and we can each grow a little bit from having learned from you on this presentation. So thanks very, very much, John. Much appreciated.
Oh, thank you.
Take care. Take care, everyone.